Yes. Hello. Nap time. Alright, I'm trying to figure out how to start streaming on Twitch. I thought I did things right, but I don't think so. Trying to multi-stream day one. How do you even... Twitch. Why is there a 13-minute video on how to start a Twitch stream? Like, I just don't know where the right button is. I looked might just not for today. You can hear me though. Yeah, you can. Okay. I have a pretty cool setup today. I tried figuring it out as much as possible. Let me see how it looks. Chat should be right here in the corner. Guess it's not. The heck? Oh wait, no, I just think, oh, there we go. Alright, I have like 3 or 4 websites today that I think are good articles. I haven't read them completely, but I skimmed over them and they seem to have a lot of useful information that I'm interested in, so I thought that we would like kind of go over that and it'd be a cool learning experience for the both of us. I have my little note set up. My Twitch name, it's just like B's Corner of Twitch, but also you can just press the link in my about section, like in the description, I believe. Like if you scroll all the way down. Yeah, I haven't posted anything. It's just I'm trying to get better at streaming, as you can see with the fancy chat overlay. Ooh, so tough. All right. Also, I don't play Fortnite like ever. Actually, hold on. I need to wear my cat thing for the clickbait views. All right. So today we're talking about theory of identity. Psychologists and philosophers have separated the identity into like various parts, trying to understand the self. And I think there's like truth in all of them. Obviously, because they studied their entire lives to do that. But okay. My volume is like too loud and too soft at the same time. Okay, that's better. Alright. Cool. Okay, let's go over there. Carl Jung's theory of personality focuses on the interplay between conscious and unconscious mind, the process of individuation. Okay, so basically how you see yourself in reference to the society around you. The theory emphasizes the integration of various aspects of personality, which I know is pretty similar to Freud, but I don't know what Carl Jung thinks about Freud. Its foundation for Myers-Briggs indicator. Carl Jung defined the psyche as the entirety of the human mind, both conscious and unconscious, encompassing thoughts, feelings, and memories and instincts. I know that also. Yes. His his labeling of the collective unconscious is pretty interesting to me because I haven't seen anybody else talk about that really, as in philosophy or psychology. Let's start with Carl Jung. Actually, I like doing Cornell notes because I was indoctrinated in my school. They were like requiring it for years. They would not accept your notes if you didn't do it, and I kind of liked it over time. So, aspects of personality. No. It's the word. Parts. The ego. Your unconscious mind. I know this differs a lot from the definition I just used in my last video. I regret using the word ego because it has so many different definitions. And somebody told me that was going to be a bad idea, but I did it anyway. And he ended up being right, so shout out to him. You're unconscious. What you actively think about and experience day to day includes your thoughts, memories, and emotions. I think that's just a very important distinction. In my last video, I said that the ego does not necessarily have to encompass thoughts, memories, or emotions. And I tried separating what Jung defines as ego here into two separate types of viewing the self, so that one would be more helpful to. Hold on, I need to change this. More helpful to tackling insecurity, emotions, and sense of self. Honestly, there's a lot going on. I'm gonna mute my music, but you do. I won't mute it for the stream. Okay. Yeah, there's like so much going on. And sense of self. Now the second personal unconscious. This part contains memories, feelings, and experiences that you've forgotten or suppressed but can still influence your behavior. Okay, so that's just what people usually define as the subconscious. I think that would be like the modern kind of definition. This is what people consider the subconscious. 3, the collective unconscious. This is his unique view, which I really like, and that I want to center my next video around. My next video I want to be about social media, but not just the common negative effects that you hear about, like lack of attention span and focus. Like I think those things are overstated at this point, and I hate when things are like just constantly repeated. It's like constantly hearing a bad song. I don't like it. So I'm trying to do something a little different. Shared by all humans. I feel like looking at this definition at first glance, it's like, what does that even mean? Because that's how I reacted to it at first. But understanding the context, it makes a lot of sense. Universal experiences, like the concept of having a mother and a father, like those types of universal experiences that are just part of being human, symbolic meanings. So, this, for example, would be something like the cross in Christianity. Like, most people in the world, most people in a culture know what that means symbolically, forgiveness of sins or whatever. Okay, the ego. Yeah, the ego is just the conscious mind in Carl Jung's view. Wait, why did I put unconscious? Your conscious mind. Okay. The ego is largely responsible for feelings of identity and continuity. I think continuity is really important there. Because, I mean, in my last video, I was trying to tackle how someone can kind of separate themselves from the potentially bad parts of ego, like over identification with a persona, which we're about to talk about right now in this article, but still maintain continuity of a self, still maintain those memories, thoughts, and emotions. And I think that Buddhist philosophy, which we're going to get into later, is actually a really good uh, middle ground between having an ego in by this definition and still having by having an ego in this definition and not missing out on memories, emotions, thoughts, sense of self. Your ego forms the center of your conscious experience. Yeah, so just like the intuitive sense of I. Intuitively. The ego includes thoughts and perceptions, memories, emotions, coherent sense of self as you interact with your environment. So it's something that's like very natural. It's just a natural part of being a human evolutionarily. The ego is largely responsible for feelings. It's what allows you to wake up. Also, let me know if the music's too loud. I don't know if it is. The ego is largely. You should watch some of meme analysis videos about Jung. I think perhaps at the end. You okay? Self awareness. What does? Okay, I think I got so distracted. Why does the ego matter? Your daily consciousness is only part of your deeper psychological reality. Okay, your self awareness involves knowing how your ego works and how it interacts with unconscious elements. That's probably the most important reason. Self awareness. Growth and psychological health involve balancing the ego's needs with the insight and wisdom of your unconscious mind. I don't exactly know what they're referring to there. The ego's needs, by this definition, um, I guess what one would be perceiving as their needs, but then the unconscious mind would also be aware of that. Unless this is referring to like the kind of primal part of the mind in which Freud talks about a lot with the ID, I believe. I'm not sure, but personal unconscious. While the ego handles your conscious experience, Jung argued it only represents a small portion of your total psyche. Beneath your conscious awareness lies a vast unconscious world containing your hidden fears, desires, dreams, and deeper aspects of personality. Carl Jung's I feel like this has been so popularized that people don't even realize where it came from. Like I think everybody just has accepted this at this point. Like, oh, there's a conscious mind, there's an unconscious mind. Carl Jung's personal unconscious is the part of our mind holding forgotten memories, hidden feelings. It's where repressed thoughts and emotions reside. Mhm. This layer includes forgotten memories. Okay. Unconscious. Forgotten experiences. I wonder, does he actually believe that no experience can ever be forgotten? I mean, that's just like in the unconscious. I mean, I don't know if that's possible. I guess nobody knows for sure. I don't know a lot about that. It probably has to do with neuroscience, repressed memories, and complexes. I don't know a lot about complexes. I know there's different ones. I know there's like a mother complex. Emotional clusters around specific themes. Emotional clusters. What a funny phrase. Emotional clusters around themes. Hmm. Such as family, relationships, or success. Well, all of those are external. Societal? Hmm. Maybe not. I'm not sure. Complexes significantly influence your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors without your conscious awareness. Oh, influence thoughts, feelings, behavior. I'll just put thoughts because those then point to feelings and behaviors without conscious awareness. Consciousness. For example, you had an embarrassing experience giving a public speech as a child. Even if you consciously forget about it, you might still feel anxiety when asked to speak in front of people as an adult. This anxiety stems from a complex stored in your personal unconscious. But what about that makes it a complex? Like, is it not just a learning experience? Is it not just like Pavlovian conditioning? What about that makes it a complex versus just learned experience? I don't know. Maybe this example is not the best. Okay. Or maybe they just didn't explain it and I have trouble understanding. If you consciously forget about it, you might still feel anxiety. Okay. Well, they'll have example. Everything of which I know, but of which I am not at the moment thinking. Everything of which I was once conscious, but have now forgotten. Everything perceived by my senses, but not noted by my conscious mind. Everything which, involuntarily and without paying attention to it, I feel, think, remember, want, and do. All the future things which are taking shape in me and will sometime come to consciousness. All this is the content of the unconscious. I feel like the unconscious is better defined as everything that the conscious is not. Like, it's basically just everything else. It's like leftovers. It's important to note that the contents of the personal unconscious are not always negative. They can be positive or neutral aspects. That is an important point. Okay. Why does the personal unconscious matter? Let's see. Personal unconscious is important because it significantly shapes your thoughts. Okay. This significantly shapes basically your personality, your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, beliefs, ideas, values that you live by, basically your personality. And I think that that's really what I'm trying to focus on today. Because when connecting this to social media, when you're constantly presented with short form content in which you cannot rationally judge, you're given 1 to 5 seconds to think about it. It's not enough to consciously determine what you feel and think about it. It's just going to be all transferred to your unconscious, and your unconscious is going to deal with it, theoretically. And because your unconscious basically shapes your personality, that is what I'm arguing, what I want to argue in this future video, that social media, that is one of the main reasons social media, especially short form content, is harmful. Because it shapes your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, beliefs, ideals, everything. A lot of the time unconsciously. There is no space to rationally consider. Significantly shapes personality, a persona even, the self. Becoming aware of its contents allows you to live more authentically. Yeah, and that word authentically is really bloated there. I know. Uh, because I feel like authentically also has a lot of definitions. Heal all wounds and grow emotionally and psychologically. I might need to go. My mom just got here. I need to say hi to her. You guys can read this. You guys can read my notes. Okay. Alright. Okay, what are we thinking? Let me read chat. But how does this get us cash? That was exactly what my freaking nobody cares about philosophy, but I do video was about. I was like, nobody cares about this because it doesn't really affect their day to day. We need more. No, but yeah. If we learn how to psychoanalyze, we can charge for our expertise. Alright, I also hate that. I don't like that the end goal of things should always be money. That's why I hate HR. My mom works in HR. She's really up there. She's a girl boss, but it's just that the bottom line always goes over everything. Like if an employee is being unproductive, they're like, well, how can we make them more motivated to get us more money? And then it's like, okay, health does not matter anymore. But anyway, even when they oh, theoretically, our environment invokes a subconscious response, and our ego navigates the experience by crafting an identity around it. A soup of unconscious souls explaining itself to itself. Yeah, I I tried explaining that in like that one video was like, to what extent am I my environment or something like that. Like, Am I myself or a product of my environment? Something like that. And you're right that the unconscious, if it is constantly observing everything around you, then that would mean that to an extent you are a product of your environment. And this is natural. However, I think in the case of social media that it becomes like double harmful because then you aren't aware of so many things. Especially because the whole point of social media is to kind of present yourself in a at least like Instagram and things like that, present yourself as successful, attractive, and like your accomplishments, things like that. So it's very infested with lots of ideas, ideals, societal structures, and I think consuming those all of the time, whenever you have a minute of free time and you can scroll on reels, just completely changes who you are because of the unconscious. Because you're constantly consuming the content. Okay, but yeah. Continue. One. Wait, where was I? Why does the personal unconscious matter? Becoming aware of its contents allows you to live more authentically, heal old wounds, and grow emotionally and psychologically. I think I think showing the importance, though, explaining it to other people who aren't familiar with psychology or care about philosophy is very hard, and those are all good reasons. Authenticity? I don't think most people really think about authenticity, whether they're a product of their environment or not. You know, that's what I define as authenticity. I have no idea what this definition is. Heal old wounds. Although I think it's very hard to do that by yourself. Uh, Grow emotionally and psycho. I'll just put emotionally. I mean, I do wonder what this article meant by authenticity. Okay, one. Influences. Wait, is this the second list of why the personal unconscious matters? Oh, okay. Influences behavior and emotions. Yes, I feel like we all, as humans, should naturally be gravitating towards what is influencing me at all times. I want to know, who am I, and for what reason? How have I become this way? I don't know. Understand influences. I'm already running out of space. Contains complexes. So understanding complexes. Complexes are emotionally charged patterns. Is that what the other definition? Emotional clusters. And now it's charged patterns. Oh god, I'm gonna have trouble with this complex concept. Oh no, they're right here. Okay. For example, okay. Authenticity, meaning aligning with rationally considered values, almost like virtues, like the Stoic freaking definition of virtue. Aligning with rational values. And rational is also a bloated definition there. That could mean so many things, but oh well. Heal old wounds through self awareness. I think that just feeds into everything else. Grow emotionally. Understand influences. Those are self explanatory. Also, my finger is bleeding. Just don't look at that. Understand complexes. So, Complexes are emotionally charged patterns formed by past experiences. Individuation involves uncovering and resolving these internal conflicts. Okay. So Carl Jung's end goal is individuation, which is very similar to probably the Stoic concept of like aligning with virtues. And it might be similar to the Buddhist concept of like transcendence, I guess. The thing is with psychology, I feel like all of these things just like overlap over time, and that's why you need to learn about all of them and kind of combine them. That's what I strive to do. So the end goal for him is individuation. A complex can be triggered by situations or interactions that resonate with its emotional theme, causing an exaggerated reaction. Okay, I'm gonna do a whole page on complexes here. Let's see. This margin is for me later to like look back at my notes and understand them better. Complexes triggered by situations that resonate with its emotional theme. This reminds me very much of trauma and what we believe that to be today, causing an exaggerated reaction, a trauma response. Reaction. I feel like there's so many recycled ideas in psychology, just people noticing things over and over and trying to explain them in better and better ways. They can significantly influence your choices, feelings, and self-esteem. Okay. I wonder if there are positive complexes then. Can there be positive self-esteem complexes, like healthy self-esteem, not overly confident, but healthy? Common examples. Inferiority. I think that one's a popular one. Complex feeling inadequate or superior, leading to self-doubt, anxiety, or compensatory behaviors like seeking excessive validation. You know, BoJack Horseman. No, but actually, need for validation to soothe self-worth debates internally. Now, mother complex. I've never heard of this. I'm just kidding. I mentioned it earlier, but I didn't read the definition. I've only heard it here. Unresolved feelings towards one's mother, which can manifest as dependency, fear of abandonment, or difficulty forming healthy relationships. I feel like that can also... Isn't this what people say daddy issues are? Dependency, fear of abandonment? I don't know. Results in unresolved feelings. I would like an example. Results in dependency. But also I feel like we have to make the distinction that if you have the results of any of these complexes, that doesn't mean you have a certain complex. And again, I'm still asking the question, like, well, what about, is this not just like Pavlovian conditioning where, you know, this is not just Pavlovian conditioning where something bad happened to me in the past, so now I've learned from that and now I want to cope as a result, and it results in something that looks like one of these complexes. Can you even see that? Well, you see it okay. Power complex. An intense drive for control or dominance. Is this like the God complex type of thing? Light yagami. An intense drive for control, sometimes stemming from feeling powerless earlier in life. Stemming from lack of control, I think, is a better descriptor than powerless. Driving, control seeking, later. Okay. This is kind of like the... Wait, is that it? I should get a better website with more complexes. Okay. I'm gonna find one. Complexes. Carl Jung. Complexes. Theory of complexes. Okay, list of Carl Jung's. Actually, I actually don't think it's very important for today's goal. Let's try to not go down rabbit holes because I think it's very easy to. Insight into inner conflicts. That is a very good reason. Guides personal growth. What about making money? What about making money? I think that's so funny how Stoicism was turned into like personal growth based to use this to make money. In the end, you're gonna make money. Okay. Collective unconscious. Carl Jung's collective unconscious refers to a deeper layer of the unconscious mind shared by all human beings. All? I don't know about all. Unlike the personal unconscious, which is unique to your personal experience, the collective unconscious is universal and inherited. It contains instincts, patterns, images, and themes common across all cultures and time periods. Common across all cultures? That is pretty crazy. I thought across was a good example. I don't know if across is culturally significant to all cultures. The collective unconscious is a universal. Okay. Key features: universal and shared. Okay. Universal. Inherited. Jung believed these shared elements are passed down genetically, much like physical traits, and shape human behavior across generations. How does that work if they're a collection of ideas? Or does he mean like it's passed down through kind of like how generational trauma is passed down? According to Jung, the human mind has innate characteristics imprinted on it as a result of evolution. These universal predispositions stem from our ancestral past. Does he really mean DNA inherited, or does he mean mentally inherited? Because I feel like mentally inherited makes a lot of sense, but DNA, I'm not so sure. Contains archetypes. I also know that that's a big thing, but I don't know what it really is, or what the examples are. Archetypes are universal symbols and themes that are shared across all human cultures and epochs. Some examples include the mother, the hero, the child, the wise old man, the trickster, and so on. Represents common aspects of human experience. Okay. expressed through symbols. I just think symbols can carry different meanings for different peoples. So I'm not really sure. Examples. Is this like getting fear when like a tiger jumps at you? It okay, never mind. It seems like he's proposing something a bit more. Yeah, I don't think it's primal because the primal would be considered the no, not the unconscious. I was thinking of Freud. Never mind. I was thinking of the ID from Freud. I'm not sure what he thinks about primal. Well, he did mention instincts here now. Now I'm questioning the article. This is why I feel like reading their work is so much better, but I can't sometimes. Examples. These ancestral memories, which Jung called archetypes, are represented by universal themes in various cultures as expressed through literature, art, and dreams. Mythology and religion. Similar stories and figures appear across diverse cultures, like creation myths, heroic quests, floods, or resurrection stories, demonstrating universal archetypes. Interesting. I don't know much about religions besides Christianity. Let's see. Examples. Mythology. Creation myths, heroic quests. I mean, I guess. So, dreams and fantasies. Universal symbols like flying, falling, being chased, or encountering symbolic animals appear in dreams across cultures, reflecting common psychological experiences. But I feel as though the significance is not in the symbol, but in how the symbol is interpreted. I don't know. Dreams slash fantasies. Flying, falling. Cultural patterns, shared rituals or ceremonies. Hello? Oh. Oh wait, my thing is not, alert overlay is not working. There we go. Okay, thank you. Cultural patterns, shared ritual ceremonies like coming of age rituals or marriage ceremonies appear worldwide, reflecting universal human experiences. So things like love and no, I forgot marriage was not about love before. My bad. Ceremony. Okay. Cultural patterns. I forgot love was kind of a modern thing. Uh, shared rituals. That is quite interesting, though. Jung was quite the sociologist. Pop culture and media. What do you mean by that? Pepe the Frog was actually really Jungian. Films and books and stories repeatedly follow archetypal patterns. Harry Potter as the hero, Yoda as the wise old man, because they resonate with collective psychological themes. Is this how people made MBTI from this? From archetypes, different types of persons? I don't know. Stories with like similar plots. Or what's it called? I forgot what it's called. Like, oh my god, enemies to lovers, you know? I forgot what those are called. There's a term, but I don't know. Why the collective unconscious matters influences our behaviors, dreams, and myths, shaping how we understand the world. Connect with others and experience life. Okay, intuitively, maybe I'm being a bit closed-minded right now, but I feel like the symbols thing does not make sense to me. I feel like the symbols, the interpretation matters more than the symbol itself. It's why cultures across the world have similar myths, dreams, and beliefs, even though they've never met. That is interesting, though. Recognizing these universal patterns can provide insight into your own unconscious motivations, fears, and behaviors. As in your dreams, the collective unconscious is like an inherited mental library. I just don't understand how genetically, DNA wise, ideas would be inherited. That seems impossible to me. I guess it's possible, but it's like I understand in the way that generational trauma may be inherited through similar shared experiences in childhood and similar teachings and just the unconscious collection of ideas over time, but I don't know anything else. Um, Symbolism is dangerous, so I want you to know that you need to own yourself before entering there. What do you mean? Symbolism stems from interpretation, but on the primal. Oh, so it starts with the symbol, but the symbol can only be interpreted in a certain amount of ways. Like, you're not going to look at a fork and believe that it's a symbol for rebirth, you know? I can. If that's what you're saying, then that makes sense. Uh, Something can only symbolize a certain amount of things just logically. Okay, that makes more sense, actually. Um, the collective unconscious consists of pre-existent forms or archetypes, which can surface in consciousness in the form of dreams, visions, or feelings that are expressed in our culture, art, religion, and symbolic experiences. I can see that being true in like the interpretation of what the night is and what it represents. Night, darkness, the unknown, danger. I see that. So in that way, symbols can coexist in dreams and combine to create a story of something that is supposed to, in Carl Jung's view, um, illustrate what the unconscious is currently experiencing. I believe that's what he believes dreams are for. They're representations of the current unconscious state. Therapists using Jungian approaches often explore collective symbols and archetypes in dreams or creative expression to help people access deep psychological insights and healing. Okay, I can get this now. Knowing that symbols can logically only have a certain number of interpretations logically, especially when they're put together in something like a dream. The possible interpretations become so limited that you can almost be sure a dream has to mean a certain thing that is supposed to be a representation of the unconscious. I can see that. Very interesting. It's an attempt to equip the perception to make sense of what may come. Yes, because the unconscious holds more information, so it's like an intuitive expression of what the unconscious may believe is coming. That could make sense. You should look into Jung Naranjo Beatrice Chestnut's explanation of the Enneagram theory. I have not really gotten into Enneagram, just MBTI, but yeah. Jungian archetypes are universal, symbolic patterns embedded deep within the collective unconscious of every human being. Honestly, I think this is kind of not important right now. Because I feel like today is not about MBTI. Even though I know this is not MBTI, I don't know if Jung would even like MBTI. Psychological basis. The persona! This is what I want to talk about. Okay. Wait, the persona is an archetype? Oh god, maybe we do need to go back. No, I think it's fine. The persona is the outward face we present to the world. In my last video, this was kind of what I was referring to when I said ego, but more so the internal perception of your persona, if that makes sense. The persona, outward face we present to the world. It conceals our real self, and Jung describes it as the conformity archetype. See, what I was trying to present was that, perhaps you don't need a persona. I feel like having personas kind of just leads to insecurity over time. Unless you... Okay, I think you can have a persona, just it needs to be thought about in a certain way. Like, obviously you're not going to... it's just so weird. Okay. Reset. This is the public face for a role or person. Presents to others as someone different from who we really are, like an actor. The persona is the aspect of our personality that we present to the world as a means of social adaptation and personal convenience. Personal convenience, social adaptation. Convenience. The term originates from the Greek word for the masks that ancient actors used. You could think of the persona as the public relations representative of our ego, or the packaging that presents our ego to the outside world. Okay. A well-adapted persona can greatly contribute to our social success as it mirrors our true personality traits and adapts to different social contexts. Okay, this is interesting, because I would think it does not do this. Persona can greatly contribute to our social success as it mirrors our true personality traits. True is kind of bloated there. True. And adapts to different social contexts. Also, personality traits is vague. Okay, let's see. The dangers of over-identification. So, hypothetically, could you just be aware that something is a persona that you're presenting and you're not identifying with it, so then therefore it becomes healthy and you just know how to manage social contexts? You don't feel the need to identify or align with your persona in actuality. You just know that you're kind of acting right now. And so in that sense, you aren't really affected by it emotionally. I think that could make sense. Right. I swear there's like 2 pages stuck together, or these pages are really thick. I guess they're kind of thick. Oh, no. Oh. Dangers of over-identification. This is really the main concept I'm interested in, over-identification and the downfalls of it. I think we might go to Buddhism next and skip Freud, because this concept of over-identification is talked about way more in Buddhist teachings. However, problems can arise when a person overly identifies with their persona, unable to differentiate from their professional role and their authentic self. Differentiation is key in management. So that's what I was trying to say earlier, like, hypothetically, if you were just aware that's how you are presenting as a persona, and you don't attach that persona or being like that persona to your self-worth at all, then hypothetically, is it healthy? Is it okay? Like, for example, if you're speaking to a child and you're an adult, you have very different experiences, you're going to adapt your language to that child just naturally. So in that way, even if it's a small way, you're implementing a persona for personal convenience. And so in that scenario, you're not going to be like, censoring the curse words. Wait, what was I going on about? I lost my train of thought. The differentiation is key in management. As long as you're aware that you're just implementing this persona to speak to this child temporarily, and it doesn't attach to your self-worth in any way, then in that way is a persona even healthy? Is it good? I think Freud would say yes. I think that's what he defines as ego, or the super ego. Yeah. It's key in management. An example would be a teacher who continuously... Yeah, I read this before. I did not like this example because I don't like the idea of roles being the only way that you can over-identify. Ways you can over-identify. So here they give two examples. They give a teacher who continuously treats everyone as if they were students, or someone who is overly authoritative outside their work environment. These two examples are roles: a manager and a teacher who treats people outside of their professional role as if they were still in their professional role. But I don't really think identification is about roles. I think that it could also apply to emotions, beliefs, ideas. For example, the beliefs and what that means to how you are presented in society, being extremely right-wing or left-wing, and liking how that makes you seem to other people. I think that at the core of it is not roles, but instead how you like to be perceived, if that makes sense. Emotions, like, for example, in dating, the concept of, or the idea of, don't chase, like, let them come to you. It's more common for women, like, let them chase you. You're gonna attract them. And in that way, that choice of identifying with, like, indifference to somebody's advances in that scenario is kind of manipulative, because you are doing it for an end goal, and it's inherently inauthentic because you're not doing it as an expression of your true desire for somebody. Because if you truly desire somebody, you're going to want to be interested in them. You're not going to force indifference on yourself. So in that way, I think over-identification can also apply to emotions and trying to control your emotional responses to situations. It could also be like, let's say you're breaking down and you're overly identifying with your sadness, saying, I am sad, completely, I am depressed completely, instead of I am feeling sad, and kind of putting into perspective the emotion on like on a scale of time, like, oh, I'm sad right now, but tomorrow, next week, probably won't be. And so I think that's how extreme sadness, as an example, beliefs, politics mostly, I think. Religion, actually. Religion is a really good example. Just fundamentalism. And I think what's a commonality between these three? Probably coping. We were talking about this on the Discord server in like a voice chat 2 days ago. Coping mechanism. I'm not sure if a coping mechanism is a requirement, but rather like just a common similarity for over identification. I would need to think about it more. I don't know, but coping mechanism, concealing negative self-perception. Self-perception. Here we go. I feel like there's more than roles, emotions, and beliefs. It can also just be like concepts, like the concept of being productive. I'll add that. Concepts. I overly identifying with the concept of being productive. Uh, Assigning yourself that trait, that characteristic that you desire to live up to, and then if you don't, you feel like your identity is falling apart. Yeah. Being productive. Let me reach out. I think depression is misunderstood. Probably. It's not extreme sadness. It's being emotionally numb. That is a very true distinction. I'm glad you said that. Thank you for correcting me. Like you have been stressed and sad so long that the emotional neurons shut down to protect you. That is very, very true. I probably should not have said depression in that case. Um, but extreme sadness. Well, Christ no-clipped through walls and appeared and disappeared. Oh yeah. After Jesus was resurrected, didn't he like appear to 500 people? I think it's somewhere in like John or something. I don't know. I'm not very good at the Bible. Concepts seem a bit like a catch-all. Yeah, that's kind of true. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, you're kind of right. Yeah. Oh god, that could probably be separated into smaller ideas. You're right. I'm just gonna put that there though. um, While this can be frustrating for others, it's more problematic for the individual. Can I not? What? Okay, I can't highlight anymore. Let me see. Interact? Oh, no. Just interact. Well, this can be frustrating for others. Can I highlight the text? No! Okay, well, I'm on the third paragraph. I'll just move it to the top. While this can be frustrating for others, it's more problematic for the individual, as it can lead to an incomplete realization of their full personality. Case study. I heard of this girl on TikTok recently. Sometimes I like watching those reaction videos of like, whoa, this girl is being super bad and is canceling. She's getting canceled every day. She was basically saying, I'm better for not participating in hookup culture. I'm better for doing this. I'm better for being pretty. I'm better for being blah, blah, blah. And she had all of these characteristics that she believed made her better than other people. She was also into manifestation, so that kind of trapped in her belief system, because if she's not thinking positively about herself, then that means that she's going to lose everything, because that's how manifestation works. But anyway, while this can be frustrating for others, that's why I said it. It was very frustrating for others. It's more problematic for the individual. In this case, in this TikTok girl, it's more problematic for her to have these beliefs, because then whenever she doesn't follow any of these characteristics, whenever she doesn't become beautiful, if she does participate in hookup culture, or God forbid, like something sexual happens to her that she didn't want, she'll start to view herself in a negative way. That is a danger of over identification, where like you're overly identifying, and then when you no longer are aligning with those characteristics, like being productive, like being a manager, like being a teacher, like not being sad, and you're like identifying with that sadness, you're going to feel uncomfortable afterward. Yeah. Lead to an incomplete realization of their full personality. That's very true, because the whole thing is persona. The whole thing is mask. Okay. The persona is shaped during childhood, 100%, driven by the need to conform to the expectations of parents, teachers, and peers. Okay. I think that's important. Shaped by parents, teachers, and peers. It's inherently societal, because like it's a view of the self, an opinion of the self, and how you are presenting to others. View of the self slash how you're perceived is probably a better way to put it. Okay. This usually results in the persona encompassing the more socially acceptable traits. Okay, this read my mind. While the less desirable ones become part of the shadow, another essential part of Jung's personality theory. Interesting. I never knew that the persona and the shadow were two sides of the same coin. I've heard of these concepts, but I didn't know they were related. Okay. Wait, that's cool. That makes so much sense. The shadow is everything undesirable. Mm. Wait, let's get to the shadow. I'm pretty sure it's here somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Shaped by parents, teachers. The shadow archetype, as defined by Carl Jung, encapsulates the parts of ourselves that we may reject, disown, or simply don't recognize. Rooted in both our personal and collective unconscious, the shadow contains traits that we consciously oppose, often contrasting those presented in our persona, the outward mask we show to the world. I feel like because of that, because the persona is the direct opposite of the shadow and how you want to be perceived, it can very quickly become over-identified with. Because if the shadow are traits that you are consciously opposing, or unconsciously opposing, I guess, and you want to be this persona, then there you go. Now you have insecurity. Rooted in both our personal... Okay. This is the animal side of our personality. Like the ID in Freud. Really? I feel like they're completely different in the way I'm understanding them. Okay. Uh... Also, I never knew how to say this. I don't know if it's ID, I don't know if it's id. I took a psychology class and people mispronounced it in different ways. I don't know. It is the source of both our creative and destructive energies. In line with evolutionary theory, it may be that Jung's archetypes reflect predispositions that once had survival value. Okay. I mean, isn't his whole thing integrating the shadow because it does have survival value? It does, at least have health value, mental health value. The shadow isn't merely negative, it provides depth and balance to our personality, reflecting the principle that every aspect of one's personality has a compensatory counterpart. Balance? Balance? Balance provides depth and balance. I feel like balance is so weird there. Oh god. It provides depth and balance to our personality. I'm gonna read trash. Shadow and persona are two puppets joined at the strings. Interesting. I didn't know that before. It makes so much more sense now. Only death is real. Fiction may be more real than non-fiction. I mean, that reminds me of Plato, like Plato's forms. You said ID, right? Okay. Id? Is it id or ID? ID. My teacher said id. Also, I hated that psychology class. She was not passionate about psychology. It's valued by being harmonious. No yin if no yang. I mean, but then it's like, okay, productivity and rest. But the shadow, in this case, would be rest. I don't know. Something's wrong, and I don't think my brain is working fast enough. ID and id are interchangeable. Say it either way. Okay. Perfect. Let go of the wanting. Let yourself die. You are not. Let God guide your intuition. Meditate. What your teacher said? Okay, id. Id. I never knew. Integrating the shadow. Where there is light, there must also be shadow. Overemphasis on the persona while neglecting the shadow can result in superficial personality preoccupied with others' perceptions. TikTok girl example. Okay, let's see. Neglecting the shadow, that can look like judgment towards certain characteristics in the self and others. In self and others. This then leads to defensiveness, needing to prove that you aren't, defensiveness, being rude for no reason, rude and judgmental, and in the end, this is all just because it's a coping strategy to not face the shadow. The shadow, which is the undesirable characteristics in yourself. Who said that quote? The one that was like, the traits you are often angry at the most are the traits you have within yourself. I think that was Freud. Shadow elements often manifest when we project dislike traits onto others. No, literally. Serving as mirrors to our own disowned aspects. Engaging with our shadow can be challenging, but it's crucial for a balanced personality. So if you call someone fat as an insult, it's actually because you're scared of being fat. Ooh. Mean Girls. Mean Girls, the movie, had it right all along. The process, which can involve recognizing and integrating these dark elements into our conscious self, aids in fostering a well-rounded personality. Yeah, well-rounded personality. This concept of well-rounded personality should actually be defined. Well-rounded personality. What do you mean by that, article? The interplay of the persona and the shadow is often explored in literature such as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where characters grapple with their dual natures, further illustrating the compelling nature of this aspect of Jung's theory. Okay. What is this ideal, well-rounded personality? What would they do in different situations? Well, number one, judgment, judgment, neglect is instead turned into acceptance. And I don't want to say open-mindedness, but what's the opposite of judgment? I mean, acceptance, but with understanding. Why understanding why you don't like certain characteristics. For example, right? Let's say you're judging someone. No, that's a bad example. Easy. Let's just say you're calling someone fat and you're like, they're ugly. But really it's because you're scared of becoming fat or even perceive yourself as fat, and so it's kind of just a projection of what you believe is valuable within the self and within society or whatever, within your persona, what you believe is valuable. But let's say you're trying to integrate the shadow and you start accepting that, some people are fat, and that's not really a bad thing. I don't believe that if I become fat that I have less value. You start integrating the shadow. Being fat is not bad inherently. It does not mean I have lower self-worth and that I should be insecure. But then where's the nuance? Where was the truth in you saying, I don't like people that are fat? The nuance is that, oh, well, potentially it can cause a lot of health issues, but it doesn't contribute towards self-worth. Perhaps that example was also bad. It's just that I think traits can be viewed as objectively bad in some ways, but still accepted, and where judgment is not really applicable. For example, better example, um, hookup culture. At times, it can be unhealthy. Obviously, there's diseases spreading, there's mental effects if you're doing it as a coping mechanism or for validation, that's pretty unhealthy. But you should also probably not judge people because they're figuring things out on their own. You could say, hey, I think that's probably bad for you in the way that you're approaching this. But judgment is not really warranted, because what judgment turns into and why it's unhealthy for you, why judging people is unhealthy for you, is because you've now created this standard of hookup culture is bad. So now you have this idea, this standard, that if you ever engage in hookup culture or you ever do anything that is kind of in alignment with hookup culture, like let's say You believe dressing in a certain way, dressing kind of provocatively, is in alignment with hookup culture and this concept of like being provocative. Like you think that's bad. People should not be provocative at all. And let's say one day you have this urge to wear a dress that is kind of provocative, that you really love in public. How are you then going to feel about yourself now that you've created this standard of hookup culture and being provocative in general is bad? You're going to feel insecure because you're like, what's wrong with me? That's why I don't think that judgment is healthy, but rather acceptance of why something may be bad, like accepting, hookup culture is bad in these ways, especially if it's used as a coping mechanism, but judgment is not necessarily warranted. Like, I think the moral superiority is unnecessary, if that makes sense. I should write that down. Moral superiority. No moral superiority. I wouldn't wear a dress, honestly. Are you a man? Your judgment will be just. This doesn't make sense to me. I'm barely making sense of it myself. We're learning together, my friend. This was certainly... Okay. This was certainly Jung's belief, and in his book, The Undiscovered Self, he argued that many of the problems of modern life are caused by man's progressive alienation from his instinctual foundations. Very Freud are caused by men's progressive alienation from his instinctual foundations. I wonder which ones. Instinctual. Maybe by instinctual he's just referring to the shadow in general. I just realized I skipped a whole section that's probably very important. So finally, there is a self which provides a sense of unity in experience. For Jung, the ultimate aim of every individual is to achieve a state of selfhood, individuation/selfhood. Individuation/selfhood. What is the definition of that, dear Freud? I mean, Jung? Similar to self-actualization, okay, in Buddhism. See, it's all coming together. And in this respect, Jung, like Erikson, is moving in the direction of a more humanist orientation. That was certainly Jung's belief. He argued that many of the problems are caused by man's progressive alienation from his instinctual foundations. But by instinctual, does he mean primal, or does he mean instinctual as in something closer to the divine and the soul? Like instinctually, inherently, I like psychology. I don't know why, since I was little. Like, I just liked it. I gravitate toward it. Is that what you mean by instinctual? Or is it more so like what Freud would say in relation to like sexual desire? What do you mean? Please. I hate when words have multiple definitions. The role of balance and integration. One aspect of this is his views on the significance of the anima and the animus. I skipped that section. Do I need to go back? Jung argues that these archetypes are a product of the collective experience of men and women living together. What? Okay, now I'm really confused because I skipped this. Do I need to... I thought this wasn't relevant. In Western civilization are and women expressing masculine tendencies. For Jung, the result was that the full psychological development of both sexes were undermined. Wait, that's kind of progressive of him. Wait, oh. Jung is saying that, men shouldn't be scared of being feminine because then it limits the expansion of the self? Wow. I agree with you, bro. How interesting. Together with the prevailing patriarchal culture of Western civilization, this has led to the devaluation of feminine qualities altogether, and the predominance of the persona, the mask, has elevated insincerity to a way of life which goes unquestioned by millions in their everyday life. Jung was a feminist. I'm just kidding. No, that's quite interesting. I'll say in relation to social gender roles, devaluation of femme by a man, and vice versa. Limits integration of the shadow. Uh, we should definitely get into. Okay, this is just MBTI. Wait, individuation. I need this. Definition. The lifelong psychological process of becoming your true, authentic self. Is this not just Nietzsche's Übermensch? Oh God, is the lifelong? So many people coming to the same conclusions. Me as well. I'm not disagreeing with Jung here. The lifelong. I'm just gonna psychological process of becoming, literally becoming, just like Nietzsche would say, becoming, where is it? Your true authentic self. True authentic self. It involves integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of our mind and reconciling our many inner contradictions. Inner contradictions. That's important. Inner contradictions meaning. Let's see if this article expands on that. In practical terms, the process of individuation might involve self-reflection, dream analysis, exploration of personal symbols and themes, and conscious engagement with the unconscious parts of the self. It is often a transformative journey. It's important to note. Individuation is a natural process and inherent goal of human life. That's so Übermensch of you, Jung. However, it also requires conscious effort and active engagement with the unconscious to fully realize this potential. I feel like this is just becoming a healthy human being who doesn't really feel bad about themselves. I probably shouldn't connect everything to insecurity. I know there's other things and other reasons it's important, other things it affects besides self-worth and self-image, but it's just my immediate. Jung believed. Wait, no, I want to see the chat. I need to go over here. Jung believed everyone could do the process of individuation. Nietzsche believed only a few people in the future could achieve it. Okay, but I feel like Nietzsche believed only a few people could do it because it's so hard. And I think Jung would also agree with that most people just don't prioritize that in their lives. Dream as you sleep on your back. Okay, that's side note. I shouldn't talk about my dream stories. Jung's main influence was Nietzsche. Really? Oh my god, I called it. You should read some context into the philosophers you read first. It helps to understand where they're coming from. I should. You are so right. Tool is a great band. Interesting. You must go to the astral realm and shake hands with the demons. Oh my god. No, I went on a whole journey of like lucid dreaming. That's what it's called. I'm very good at remembering my dreams now, but I also get sleep paralysis all the time. How do you take notes? Does it help you remember what you've learned? It only helps me remember. This is a valedictorian tip, I guess. If on this left side, I actually review my notes after I've taken them. And the main point of this is to make connections between the concepts so that I can understand them. So I could even like write about Nietzsche on the side here, like, oh, this reminds me of Freud, like, oh, this unconscious is kind of like the id. Read Nietzsche pretty recently. I mean, I'm trying to read his most famous one. Where is it? Thus Spoke Zarathustra. But it's so hard. I struggle with reading. I thought individuation was inevitable and a natural process of adolescence. I think it's inevitable to an extent, but to the highest extent of which you are actually no longer at all in any small capacity, not, like doing individuation to the highest extent, something similar to self-actualization or Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch. I think that's very rare. Like, obviously, I haven't in any way. I think it's so interesting. This realm is an illusion, like Buddhism. I don't think Nietzsche thought the average person was good for much anything. No, yeah, I think so as well. Absolutely. He was an elitist in just about every way imaginable. Uh, I mean, kind of. Yeah. Uh, he was like, I want to write so that the average person actually can't understand me. And me, as an average person, I'm very frustrated now. I might need to go soon. I need to go and let me ask. I think like um I do want to cover Buddhism though. I think it's very important. INFJ. I took the MBTI test yesterday on live. Okay, this is the second article I thought was pretty good. Properties. Oh, oh. Okay, it works. Uh, I'm gonna. I just want to call this Ant-Man, but Anatman. I'll say it like that. Anatman. Now, Buddhism. Anatman. The Buddhist doctrine of no self. This relates to ego. I'm pretty sure no self is just a separation of ego and the self underneath that. Why you do not really exist, why the ego does not really exist. Often misunderstood as denying personhood, the Buddhist doctrine of no self simply aims to deflate the grasping ego. Grasping is a very big concept in Buddhism that took me like forever to understand. Oh my lord. Okay. No self. No self equals deflate a grasping ego. Grasping, clutching, holding on to tightly a certain perception of yourself. That's what it means. That is grasping ego. Uh, holding tightly, like holding on to a certain perception of yourself to the point that you do not want to be seen in a certain way, and that develops into insecurity, of course. Holding on to a certain self-perception. Perception, I'm pretty sure it's inherently societal, like inherently externally contrived, because it has to do with ego. By seeing ourselves for what we really are, bundles of ever-changing processes, aka a self in a fraction of time. I tried explaining this in my last video. I did it horribly, but hopefully now reading this together we can understand more. We can undermine anxiety and live more peaceful lives. The goal equals undermine anxiety. I should get ad blocker. Live peacefully. I'm surprised the goal of self-expression was not mentioned here. I thought that would be. Wait, can I not read this? What is going on? Hello? Okay. I'm just gonna do that. The teachings of the Buddha have one core purpose: to eradicate dukkha, a Sanskrit word often translated as suffering, but perhaps stronger than this, intended to capture all of life's dissatisfaction, disappointment, unfulfilled hopes, and unhappiness. I think, I'm pretty sure, but don't 100% trust me, that instead of suffering, a better definition is wishing for like something you do not have, essentially an unsatisfaction. I don't know. Yeah, dissatisfaction. Just don't listen to me, just read the article. As we discussed in our explainer of Buddha's parable of the poisoned arrow, I don't know what that is. Buddhists think alleviating dukkha is the most important task in life, and most of our suffering arises from a fundamental mismatch between how we view reality and reality itself. So Buddhism is very reality focused instead of like what is it? Utility focused, like in psychology in general. Buddhism says that this view is objectively correct, and then psychology and a lot of Western treats their views as like healthy or like an alternative. So Buddhism is trying to describe objective reality in the most correct way possible, because I think it's very philosophical, really. One of our most prominent and damaging misconceptions about reality, the Buddha thinks, is our confused notion of self. By deflating our conventional notion of self and understanding what we really are, the Buddha argues we can undermine dukkha and live more tranquil lives. Anatman, you do not really exist. In the face of it, the Buddha's concept of Anatman, no self, seems a very strange view, for our sense of self is surely one of the most familiar things to us, but there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the Buddha really means here. Indeed, there's much discussion within Buddhism itself about what Anatman entails. A vast literature sits on top of the Buddha's original insights, offering many different interpretations. That's so frustrating. When you're learning something, there's multiple interpretations, so you're like, what is it? For the purposes of this article, Buddha's original teachings. Okay. The historical context in which Buddha was operating, for he was reacting to the Brahmanic tradition. Within this tradition, the concept of Atman, a permanent self or soul, is crucial. Okay, I'm just going to write that definition. Atman is permanent self. I believe in the soul. Am I about to be proven wrong? With his concept of anatman, then, the Buddha is not necessarily denying the convention of people. He is specifically targeting the Brahmin concept of Atman, which involves a persisting essence or substance of self. Okay, this may make us think more of the Christian notion of soul than our everyday notion of self, but the Buddha's view has important repercussions for both. Okay, so there's distinctions for the soul and a permanent sense of self. For whether we call it soul or self, the Buddha thinks the reference of I, you, he, she have no real permanence. They do not exist in the way we might think they do. As in, they don't exist in objective reality. Like they are just a perception? Question mark. The autobiographical continuous self, the you of last week, yesterday, and today is just a convention, an invented simplification, a convenient and complacent way to refer to what is in reality a set of immeasurable, complex, and ever-changing processes. Okay, so the Atman actually. Continuous self. Self. It's just is an oversimplification. Okay. Buddhism is saying we're missing something with identity and how we view ourselves. A convenient and complacent way to refer to what is in reality a set of measurable, complex, and ever-changing processes. Let's talk about the ever-changing processes. Think about it. We are changing every second of every day. Our thoughts, desires, moods, memories, the hair on our heads, the nails in our fingers, the cells of our bodies, all is in flux. Identity, which is basically like the personality things they were mentioning. Thoughts, desires, moods, slash self, constantly in flux. I'm pretty sure that's gonna be our premise. It's gonna be our premise. This should lead to what they're going to say about how viewing identity is correct. So what makes the you of today the same as the you of, say, 10 years ago? This article is really nice, by the way. I kind of like it. So what makes the you of today the same as the you of, say, 10 years ago? The Buddha's answer is, well, beyond the causal chain linking you in time, nothing, because the concept of you is empty. You refers not to some permanent substance. It is simply a convenient way to refer to the myriad ever-changing individual processes that collectively we call you. The myriad ever-changing processes, I feel like, is just a way of saying that you at every second, every millisecond is something else, so then the self must be what? The self must be what? Consider a heap of sand. The word heap is simply a convenient way to refer to the fact that there are thousands of individual grains of sand stacked on top of one another. Is this referring to like the fact that there are several versions of ourselves throughout time, throughout every millisecond? Take the individual grains of sand away and nothing remains. The heap was just a shorthand way of saying thousands of individual grains of sand stacked on top of each other. So it is like with the self, the Buddha thinks. Okay. So incorrectly, we are defining the self as a collective, and it is instead a collection of parts. The self is actually a set of parts, of individual grains of sand. I really want to get into the details because I know I'm probably misunderstanding something. Nothing remains. And way of saying. Okay. Heap of sand. What do we think? I'll read chat right now. Heap of sand. Concept of I. Oh, constant I. Versus grains of sand. To true self. Does that make sense? They're relating the description of a heap of sand as averse to individual collection of a bunch of grains of sand. This would be referring to the true self, and the heap of sand would be an incorrect view of the self. Pretty sure it just has to do a lot with time. Like we are a collection of a constantly changing self through time. Oop. Let me read chat. Who said the self is static? You could be explained. It's just that. Hold on, let me read the rest. Who said the self is static? You could be expanding or contracting and still be the same. You are always capable of staying you while being influenced or isolated. The thing is, I think this is more about expression. Because nobody believes that the self is static. If you think about it for more than a second, like, yeah, obviously I'm never changing. But the thing is, we treat the self as if it is static. We define ourselves in situations. I am unattractive or attractive. I am a good person for doing this, or I am a bad person for doing this. That leads to self-judgment and viewing the self as static is largely unconscious. We don't really apply the fact that the self is actually ever changing. That's what I mean by identity / self constantly in flux should be the premise for every other belief, at least in Buddhism. In this view of identity. Go back. A famous Buddhist text that illustrates this thinking is The Questions of King Milinda. Okay. Is it the pole that is the chariot? I did not say that. Oh, okay, this is like metaphor. Is it the pole that is the chariot? I did not say that. Is it the axle that is the chariot? Certainly not. Is it the wheels, or the framework, or the ropes of the yoke, or the spokes of the wheels, or the goad that are the chariot? And to all these he still answered no. Then is it all these parts of it that are the chariot? No, sir. But is there anything outside them that is the chariot? And still he answered no. Then thus, ask as I may, I can discover no chariot. Chariot is a mere empty sound. I guess these parts can be equated to different characteristics in personality. So you are not your characteristics. Your characteristics are a description of the current self, not of the self exactly. That is how the premise of the self being constantly in flux is actually applied, because we're constantly defining ourselves in separate ways to understand and relate to our environments. Well, I like coffee. Here it is. I like coffee. But is it me who likes coffee? Is that a definition of the self? Is it the pole that is the chariot? Well, no. Self is something else. So that's what they mean by the self is empty, because it cannot really be accurately described. Is empty equals self cannot be objectively accurately described. Essentially, what I believe they're saying is that if you're currently describing yourself as a bad person, it's like you're trying to also describe the person who was born 18, 20, 30 years ago also as a bad person, and that it doesn't make sense. He goes on to explain that just as a chariot is nothing in addition to all its parts, so the self is nothing, no extra thing, in addition to all of our parts. So, that the famous philosophical question of the boat. Forgot what the boat's name is, but the idea is if you have a boat and you start taking away parts that are broken and you start repairing it, let's say it comes to a point where the boat is completely replaced with new parts. Is the boat still the same boat as it originally was? Does it still have the same identity? And the Buddhist answer to this is that there was no identity of the boat to begin with that can accurately be described. So then the question is now, well, if this was developed so that I could accurately relate to my environment, how do I accurately relate to my environment now? If the self is empty and cannot be accurately described, then how do I exist in the world? How can I possibly never identify with any characteristic? Okay. Like a chariot, the self is simply... I'm gonna write that question down because it's my question, Lucky. If the self cannot be accurately defined, then how do I exist? Like, how do I navigate the world? Okay. Also, wait, my camera's so bad. There you go. Right here, right there. Okay. Like a chariot, the self is simply a convenient fiction, a shorthand reference for the many different parts that make us up. Its existence is based in convention rather than in some ultimate persisting material of reality. So people exist in a conventional sense. We just aren't what we think we are in an ultimate sense. When we refer to individuals, we are actually referring to great masses of interacting processes bounded within particular body parts. Your name is simply a shorthand way of grouping thousands of ever-changing processes, which themselves are made up of thousands of smaller pieces, and so on. Okay. Convenient fiction, sure. Based on convention. Yeah, so this concept of a permanent self is very useful. So then how does one exist without it? In fact, much like the subatomic scientific picture of the world, Buddhists think that, at root, everything is simply made of individual pieces of dharma, like atoms, but with a minuscule time element, too. Tiny slices of the cosmos in real time, configured in different ways. There's a vast Buddhist literature that categorizes these slivers of happenings, dharmas, to describe exactly how they make up us and everything we interact with. The crucial Buddhist insight is that the sum of these tiny slices of the cosmos is not greater than its parts. You are nothing more than a composite of the changing thoughts, desires, processes, and atoms that temporarily make you up. I'm gonna read chat. Let's see. I think the trap here is assuming abandoning the self is the answer. Ego or identity are social tools and are needed for boundaries and functioning. That's what I'm saying. Like, I do think there needs to be a balance, because obviously, I mean, this whole thing is also saying that these concepts of the ego and identity are useful. They're tools, like you said. So it's like, well, how do I function in the world? How does that work? People probably have limited potentials, but they might be susceptible to expansion and contraction from extreme stimulus. Sensei. J J5294. We don't know what fundamental particles really are, just how they react in relation to one another. Something being unable to be defined wouldn't negate its existence. Yes, that is true. I think that's true. I mean, we still exist, obviously, but if the self should be defined more accurately in this way as constantly changing, constantly in flux, a collection of versions of ourselves across time, then how does one exist? B, YouTube U3Y. B, you can look into superposition and possibilities for the understanding of mathematical self. But psyche is a better way of this mind-body duality. I have never heard of mathematical self. I'm gonna like write that down over here. Mathematical self. I think the lesson is Ashira Washir, I don't know. I think the lesson is that the ego is not the thing itself, as things are always changing in identity. Zensei, if you had no pride or ego, you'd have nothing to attack or defend, because you wouldn't identify with anything that leaves you open to severe manipulation and harm. I wonder how values, virtues, in kind of like the stoicism sense apply in this scenario, because that could be an answer to leaving you open to severe manipulation and harm. Perhaps if you're guided by values and virtues, you would no longer be opening yourself up to that, because you feel as though I feel like that's kind of a catch-all though. Because if you value a good life and no, that's a bad one. If you value compassion and someone is not showing you that, well then you would distance yourself from them but not feel offended. In this case where you don't have an ego or a defined defined characteristics. You need pride to be offended when someone commits to offense towards you. I think being offended is not the goal here. Obviously it's impossible if you really have no ego. The goal here would be to put yourself in as safe a situation as possible. I do think that's probably a good answer. virtues and value, living by self-expression. I care about compassion, so if somebody is not showing that, I'll naturally start to dislike them, and but then you can't dislike with ego, really. Oh my god. I'm not sure. I think the self is supposed to be ungraspable. The Tao that can be named is not the Tao. Words cannot be used to speak of the divine, for the divine is ever changing and words are fixed. Yes, I mean, that is true. That is the concept. I see you mentioned the Tao. Uh, supposed to be ungraspable. The self is okay. I'm actually gonna write something similar to that. The self is inherently ungraspable. Unable to be defined. I think that's also a word that kind of needs a definition. I think defined needs a definition. The self is inherently ungraspable and able to be defined, for it's divine, aka not within conscious understanding. Or conventional understanding. That's why I feel like in my last video I tried that I believe looking at the self as fourth dimensional rather than three-dimensional as in something that can be described and defined and accurately looked at and studied in our world, in our current perception of three-dimensional reality. You know, this cup is white and it has this shape, and I don't know, there's little designs on it. It contains water. But the self is not that, because the self also exists throughout every moment in time. So an attempt to define the self is simply an inaccurate representation of reality, in which the self is actually fourth dimensional, not three-dimensional. I don't know if that makes sense. I was told that doesn't make sense. I don't know. Trying to say anything about the self is like trying to catch one's own shadow. Yeah, like it's an inaccurate representation of reality. Lackmoth. I believe that, like Nietzsche, Jung is just deconstructing our conceptions of self to identify its roots and utility. I don't think completely abandoning the ego is his actual prescription. They also have different definitions of ego, though. Jung's definition of ego is the conscious self in general, and it contains emotions, thoughts, and memories. But this definition of ego in the Buddhist perspective does not contain thoughts, emotions, and memories. The self is more so defined like relationally to existence, because it's fourth dimensional, if that makes sense. Oh my god. And that the goal of living, okay. Did the fourth dimensional thing like make sense, or should I never say that again? Oh god. Okay, I need to leave in, let me say, now. Okay. Alright. I need to go now. But I want like a conclusion. There's no conclusion. You do not experience your perceptions and feelings. You are your perceptions and feelings. Like, see, that's a whole other topic. We have to do a part 2. Surfer dude, we have to do a part 2 tomorrow at like the same time, like around 2 p.m. MST. Just look at when the stream started, okay? I do need to go though. I was told I need to go like 10 minutes ago. Is the ego what the term describes not included in the Buddhist explanation of the self? Let's see. I think the Buddhist definition of the self is very hard to describe because the self is described as inherently undescribable. So I think it's hard. Oh, but you asked about ego. Oh my god. I think the ego definition is also like a non-definition, like like a negative definition. I don't know. All right. Bye-bye. I know we have to leave. All right. Bye. I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye-bye. Oh my gosh, wait, somebody sent a super chat. Oh my god. And he sent one yesterday too. WB getting into Carl Jung. Let me know when/if you read Modern Man in Search of a Soul or the Red Book. Oh yes, I need to read the Red Book. Right now I'm reading Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung. Great book. I love how he writes. I was so used to reading like 18th, well, Nietzsche. I was so used to reading Nietzsche that like Carl Jung and also Plato, The Republic, breath of fresh air. So much easier to read. My goodness. But yeah. Okay. Bye.